Hi, I'm Riley Cohen. Welcome to Northwest Newsweek. The Ministry of Natural Resources has implemented a restricted fire zone across the western part of the Northwest region. The fire ban went into effect just after midnight on Friday. The MNR says all resources are needed to focus on managing the current fire load. As a result, all burning permits are suspended and open-air burning is banned, including campfires. The restricted fire zone stretches from Quantico Park to Manitoba border and north to Red Lake and Pickle Lake. The zone does not include the Thunder Bay District. Meanwhile, the fire hazard across the region has dropped from high to extreme on Wednesday, down to low to medium on Friday, due to rain and cooler weather. Evacuations remain in effect in Wassamoog First Nation, north of Kenora, and Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, north of Ignace, due to the forest fires that continue to burn close to those communities. The town of Ignace held an open house this week to help residents get in touch with the NWMO and find out more about the planned deep geological respiratory for Canada's nuclear waste. The event featured presentations and had dozens of booths set up for community members to gather information. Justin Hardy has the story.
Roughly 100 community members attended the first session of the day. They were given presentations by a number of different NWMO departments and town committees. They also had the chance to ask questions and talk one-on-one with presenters. Events like these are very important to keeping an open line of dialogue between the community and nuclear waste management officials, according to Mayor Kim Bagri. She says the growth in community involvement in these types of events is something to be proud of.
The first year, there was maybe 100. The second year, there was over 500 people. So people want to learn and educate themselves. And I think it's a great opportunity for Ignace for them to come here and, like I said, get educated more. If they need more information, this is the place to get it when we have the open houses and the different booths are set up for them to ask the questions to.
Today's open house is the first of many planned to be held throughout the roughly 10-year-long regulatory process. Residents had questions on a variety of topics, but what seemed top of mind was the future for the community's youth.
They never talked anything about young kids growing up, and I think that should have been in there very important. Because by the time they get it ready, those are going to be not teenagers, they're going to be adults.
And when they discussed employment opportunities, I want to make sure that those employment opportunities, that they consider the people in Ignace, the qualifications, etc. I asked, is there a percentage of how many people will be hired from this community? Because so far, I haven't seen that.
Well, we were really concerned on the agreement that's come out. There's been rumors around town lately that it's going to be renegotiated because there's such a vast difference between our agreement and Wabigoon's agreement, which is roughly 50 times larger. So that's a pretty big concern for residents.
The open house featured 2 sessions, and more similar events will be held in the coming years. But for now, residents can still go to the Learn More Center in Ignace or contact the Community Engagement Committee with questions they may have. Justin Hardy, TVT News.
The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has announced 5 vendors who will be helping design and plan Canada's first deep geological respiratory. The $26 billion project has now entered the regulatory phase after Ignace and Wabigoon First Nation declared themselves willing to continue on in the process late last year. Brendan Miller has more.
This is a very exciting milestone for the Nuclear Waste Management Organization.
The NWMO chose the Revel Lake site near Ignace at the end of last year. The organization then began searching for vendors who will help plan the massive project, according to Media Relations Manager Craig McBride. He says while the plans are moving along nicely, they're nowhere near ready for shovels to hit the ground.
We are now in the regulatory process that's run by the federal government, by the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, as well as the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. It's a very rigorous process with cross-country consultations, and it's expected to take, it's a multi-year process. I think for scheduling purposes, we have it at about 7 years.
The 5 companies chosen by NWMO for this phase are WSP Canada, Peter Kiewit Sons ULC, Hatch, Tyson Mining Construction of Canada, and Kinetrix Inc. They'll be working on facility infrastructure, design and engineering, mine design, mine construction planning, nuclear management advising, and nuclear systems and facilities design. McBride says there's no price tag yet on how much this work will cost.
We're paying for their work and for their resources and for their staff for these companies, and it'll depend on how long the project takes, how many hours people are putting in. So it's not sort of a set number at this point, but it's about a 3-year contract into 2028 for them to sort of come up with this design and plan for the deep geological repository.
The NWMO also still has an open call out for local supplementary vendors. The company has waived the online fee for bidders. Brendan Miller, TBT News.
6 years after a tragic house fire in KI First Nation that claimed the lives of a mother and 4 children, the man accused of starting the fire has been found guilty of second-degree murder. Jonathan Wilson has the details.
47-year-old Archie McKay was arrested in December of 2020 on 5 counts of first-degree murder. The fatal house fire occurred May 2, 2019 in Kitchener-Makossip, Ininewig, killing 47-year-old Geraldine Chapman, who was the spouse of the accused, as well as 12-year-old Angel McKay, 9-year-old Carl Cutfeet, 7-year-old Haley Chapman, and 6-year-old Shira Chapman. All 5 victims died of smoke inhalation. KI police and the OPP spent the next year and a half investigating the case before McKay was arrested. The court heard he was found with burns to his hands and face, likely due to the use of a fire accelerant. The lengthy trial in Kenora wrapped up in October. The judge released his verdict last week and found McKay guilty of second-degree murder related to the 5 deaths. There's no word yet on when the sentencing hearing will be held. Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
The 2025 Ontario budget document was released this week. A number of area leaders and politicians made their way to Toronto to take part and see what it contains for the Northwest. Justin Hardy reports.
One of the most celebrated items contained in the provincial budget is a $50 million investment to move forward with planning a new Lake of the Woods District Hospital. In a media release on Thursday, hospital officials said the announcement marks a historic moment for area communities. However, the NDP are calling for its spending plan a Band-Aid budget. Thunder Bay Superior North MPP Lise Vaugeois wanted to see more for the highway twinning project and for wildland firefighters. She also says there's far too much funding going into for-profit healthcare.
To me, that's a huge problem. Public money is for public care. It is for looking after people. It's not for shareholder profits. And the other thing is that the private clinics wind up cannibalizing our public healthcare system, right? So we keep bleeding nurses and bleeding healthcare staff into the for-profit clinics.
Thunder Bay Atikokan MPP Kevin Holland says he's very happy with the budget and what it's going to bring to the region.
So there's a number of items throughout the budget that are going to have a direct benefit to Northwestern Ontario and the residents in Northwestern Ontario. So I'm really quite excited. I was going through the budget document and a number of pages turned over where there's opportunity for businesses that are going to help us through some of the challenges we're facing as a result of the tariffs and duties being imposed from the U.S. government.
The Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association welcomes the 2025 budget. NOMA President Rick Dumas says for the most part he's happy with what this region will be getting.
We can all be critical of everything in regards to any budget that comes out, but I think in the big scheme of things, from my point of view, from a NOMA lens of the 37 municipalities I represent, it's a good budget. And again, we will go talk to government and make sure that we bring solutions if there's some shortcomings in the budget once we get into it. We're just obviously looking at the book. It's a fairly thick book, and we'll have to get into the weeds and see what it all looks like and how does it roll out and benefit us in Northwestern Ontario specifically.
Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, Thunder Bay Superior North MP Patty Haidu has some new responsibilities in the federal cabinet.
There are aspects of this portfolio I know very well. I was the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labor before.
Thunder Bay Superior North MP Patty Haidu says she's excited to tackle her new role as Federal Minister of Jobs and Families. It's the 5th cabinet post for Haidu in the past 10 years, although this one is mainly the same portfolio she held from 2017 to 2019. Justin Hardy reports.
The Ministry of Jobs and Families was created this year. It consolidates all positions associated with employment, social development, workforce development, labor, families, children, seniors, citizen services, and diversity, inclusion, and persons with disabilities into a single portfolio. Haidu has been a federal minister since 2015 in a number of roles, some of which are now included in her new ministry. She says she's ready to get started.
There are aspects of this portfolio I know very well. I was the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labor before, so I have proficiency in understanding the labor code and labor disputes and labor relations, obviously strong relationships with unions and employers. And have actually contributed to a number of different federal employment laws that have changed the landscape over the last 10 years.
Prior to her new role, Haidu's most recent cabinet post was as Minister of Indigenous Services. That ministry is being taken over by Mandy Golmasti, a Cree MP from Quebec. Haidu says she's proud of the work she's done in that role for the past 3 years, and she's excited to see what Golmasti brings.
She will be able to further those relationships. There are a number of priority areas for the government, but a number of priority areas for that minister. And I have told her I will be there to support her as she wishes and as she needs, but I have every confidence she is going to be an exemplary minister. And it's a really strong statement, I think, by the Government of Canada that First Nations leadership is important in these very sort of traditional colonial roles.
Haidu has also regained her role as minister responsible for FedNor, which she held from 2021 until just before the federal election was called in March. Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Pikangikum First Nation has declared a state of emergency due to the critical state of the community's water, sewage, and fire prevention infrastructure. The remote community north of Red Lake has also filed a motion in federal court seeking $200 million in emergency relief from Ottawa. Chief Patty Peters says there's no trust in the community that their tap water is safe to drink. Jonathan Wilson reports.
Pikangikum is one of the largest First Nations in the Northwest, with around 4,000 residents. For the past 25 years, successive chiefs and councils have been calling for federal assistance to provide basic water and wastewater infrastructure upgrades to the residents, as boil water advisories have been in effect for most of that time.
I'm 69 years old, and I'm a chief of one of the largest communities in this area. Our population is 4,000, and I'm a leader in this community, and the leader of this community doesn't have no running water in his house, no indoor washrooms in his house.
Peter says the government makes repeated promises for improvements that never come. In March of last year, Pikangikum filed a statement of claim against Ottawa, seeking $1 billion for sewer and water infrastructure upgrades. That lawsuit was amended this past February to now seek $2 billion to also address the lack of fire hydrants and sprinkler systems in the community. Because of the slow pace of the courts, lawyers for Pikangikum filed a motion in federal court on Thursday demanding $200 million in emergency relief to be put into a trust now to address their water, sewage, and fire prevention needs that are, quote, on the brink of failure.
There are, about 7 water points in the community, but only one is operational today, and the other outlet is at the water treatment plant. And people, actually run out of clean drinking water. They don't have the money to buy, clean drinking water from the stores.
The chief and council also declared a state of emergency, the 4th one since the year 2000. The feds issued a statement in response, saying everyone in Canada should have access to safe and clean drinking water. The Government of Canada respects the choice of First Nations, including Pikangikum, to seek the court's assistance on the important issue of safe drinking water. Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
A $5 billion class action lawsuit over the housing crisis in remote First Nations is now awaiting a decision. Sandy Lake is one of the lead plaintiffs in the class action, which includes over 100 First Nations across Canada. The court hearing recently wrapped up. Justin Hardy reports.
they understand and they appreciate it really shouldn't be normal. They shouldn't be living like second-class citizens. They shouldn't be living as though they're in a third world country when they're here in Canada.
First Nations, such as Sandy Lake in northwestern Ontario, allege that Canada has failed in its duties over the on-reserve housing crisis across remote and northern First Nations in Canada. Stephanie Wilsey, a lawyer with McCarthy Tatro, the legal representatives for the First Nations, says the lack of housing in northern and remote communities has severely lowered the quality of life on reserve.
Their claim has to do with both the underfunding and policies impacting housing on reserves, which has resulted in severe overcrowding and housing conditions that require significant major repairs.
The lawyers in the case argued that it is Ottawa's responsibility to provide adequate housing on reserves. They allege that Canada deliberately underfunded housing on reserves. In response, the federal government released a statement of defense in 2024 that said First Nations are responsible for planning, procuring, and managing their own housing stock. Canada supports their housing projects through funding. Canada does not owe any legal obligation or duties to build and maintain houses on reserve. The class action is asking for $5 billion in damages and in order that the federal government provide adequate housing on reserve.
They're looking to hold the government accountable to their obligations to properly fund and ensure that there's reasonable access to housing on reserves, which Canada created.
The hearing on the lawsuit wrapped up on Thursday in Winnipeg. A decision from the federal court is expected to take several months. Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Members of Rocky Bay First Nation and the people who provide the community's child and family services are holding protests over funding cuts by the band and the impact it will have on the support programs they rely on. Pickets were set up last week at the Rocky Bay Child and Family Services office in Thunder Bay and at the one on the reserve north of Nipigon. The offices provide aid to Rocky Bay members and their children on and off the reserve who are experiencing family violence or struggling with maintaining a healthy lifestyle. The protesters say a meeting was held to announce the funding cuts to various programs, so they decided to take quick action to bring attention to what's happening.
The agency, which represents the people and children in the community here, are caught between the First Nation governance and ISK in terms of funding, not unlike a Jordan's principle. So as these bodies argue this out over who should fund, it's the children and families that are going to suffer here.
We should be heard, and nobody's listening. We've been to band meetings, and there's been motions that are supposed to happen, and they happen, and nothing happens. So it's just like, what about our voices? What about off reserve? We always get told, well, you're off reserve, but we matter. We're on the membership list. We all belong together.
It's a much needed services, and it's, for us to help our membership to heal. That's the main thing why we're stepping up as a Rocky Bay Child and Family Services, is to get everybody back on a healing journey.
The chief of Rocky Bay, Gladys Thompson, did not reply to a request for comment. A 64-year-old man has been charged by Kenora OPP on numerous drug trafficking offenses after a major drug seizure in the community. The suspect was arrested last week by police investigators who executed a search warrant on a residence as well as a vehicle. The estimated street value of the cocaine, meth, oxycodone, and hydromorphone pills is $185,000. Police also found close to $6,000 in cash. The accused has been reprimanded into custody and was made his first court appearance in Kenora. MPP Sol Mamakwa spoke at Queen's Park this week regarding the mental health of police officers working in remote First Nations in Ontario. He says those officers often carry out patrolling with no backup and are put in dangerous situations. The NDP member for Kiewit-Noon asked Health Minister Sylvia Jones if the government finds this to be acceptable.
Officers patrolling an entire region or community by themselves with no backup. Police chiefs treated differently because they are Indigenous. Officers in dangerous situations without the needed resources. To the Premier, do you find this reality acceptable?
It is critical And we know that when we have strong police services and police forces, we have strong and safe communities, which is why we, of course, have added over the last 3 years support for mental health for our first responders, specifically early intervention, upstream care for first responders before they experience crisis, trauma-informed care, programming that builds on resiliency skills, training for management and office staff to help support their frontline colleagues. Look, I know that we can do more, and we will continue to support our frontline officers wherever they serve in the province of Ontario, because it is the right thing to do.
Up next, Nipigon residents get a chance to voice their concerns at a town hall meeting.
This is where the municipality has to identify how it's going to afford levels of service that it currently has going forward.
Welcome back. Nipigon residents got the chance to question their town council and administrators over a number of issues last week. The town hall-style special meeting of council was held at Nipigon Community Centre. Justin Hardy has more.
Leadership took the opportunity of the meeting to explain item by item a planned 4 to 4.5% tax levy increase. Administration also went over planned capital purchases for this year, as well as where the town currently stands on its asset management plan. CAO Lars Moffat says Nipigon is currently working with another agency to finalize the plan.
And this is where the municipality has to identify how it's going to afford levels of service that it currently has going forward. So if we can't afford them, we have to show what is going to be cut. So right now we're going through that plan.
Roughly 20 residents of the town made it out to the meeting and had questions on a number of topics. One of the hot-button issues were planned changes to sewage services. Those will no longer be paid for through city taxes, but instead through municipal water bills starting next year.
So for all users, the intent is to transfer over this service, the sewer services from the tax bill effective January 1st, 2026, similar to what occurs in other communities. So this is a standard process of what's been followed in other communities to put the water and sewer on one specific bill. So as of right now, we don't know what that's going to look like. We've played with a few figures, but that percentage rate is between 30 and 45% of water costs is what it's going to look like.
In addition to the forum, leadership also held informal meet and greets before and after the meeting to allow citizens one-on-one chats with council and administration. Mayor Suzanne Kuko says those informal chats are very important for getting citizen input.
Because, they might be too embarrassed
to say, you know, I didn't quite understand the answer that you gave to that question, so can you expand on that? They might have additional questions. And it's really good to meet face to face. I know most people in town, but some people that came tonight I didn't know. So it's really important to get that face to face and to understand what all the different challenges are that people face and the questions that they have. And hopefully we helped clear a few things up tonight.
Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Riley Cohen, and I'll catch you next time.